All right, yeah, this is going to be another one of the tools that we can use, because obviously we're starting to see there's several different ways we can use the constitutional provisions against them. So I'm going to go through and show you why the state of, for instance, in my state, the state of Michigan versus you, okay, is constitutionally invalid on its face, and why every single court case like this violates your rights. It violates the structure of Republican form of government, and it's violating the very purpose of the Constitution itself. So we've all seen this on the traffic tickets or ordinance violations and criminal charges that they like to, a lot of these things they like to call criminal when they're not criminal because there's no injured party. So we got to really stop and pause, okay, and ask ourselves, who is the state exactly? What is the state? The state is writing the statute. The state's enforcing their statute with their policy enforcers, because that's all they are. They're not law enforcement, they're policy enforcement, masquerading just like the judges masquerading as actual law, okay, but they're not. The state's prosecuting the case through state or city attorneys. The state's paying the judge, and the state is profiting from the fines and the convictions. So that now means the state is the accuser, the state is the enforcer, the state's the prosecutor, the state is the judge, and they're also the beneficiary. So that's not justice. It's a closed loop system of power with no neutral third party, which we're guaranteed. So this is violating the Constitution at its core, 100%. And this provision that I'm going to dive into really shows you, and this is another huge tool that people can, once you comprehend it, we can use this against them. And so it's Article 3, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, and this is a fatal jurisdictional defect, one of the many jurisdictional defects. So this reads, in all cases in which a state shall be a party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. So let's break this down and really think about this. All cases, no, there's no exception for traffic ordinances or minor matters. And then it also states in which a state shall be a party, meaning the state is on one side coming against you, right? And it also goes on to tell us that the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction, meaning only the Supreme Court may hear the case at first instance. Okay, that's where when the state's trying to bring something against you, it's supposed to go right. They can't be judging their own case. Okay, and there's reasons for this, and that's, as I get into this, you're going to really see it. So if the state is named the party and the case does not originate in the U.S. Supreme Court, there's no lawful jurisdiction, the judge is not neutral, and the proceeding is structurally void, because the Constitution literally prohibits the state from judging its own case. Okay, and then we have, and this clause exists to stop the state from being the prosecutor and the judge at the same time, because we all see what's happening with that, right? No one's getting justice. It can't be fair, right? Because obviously the state's not going to go against itself, right? So they're using us as debt slaves. So a court of record exercising judicial power must proceed to the common law, be independent of the executive and legislative control, which we know they're not, be neutral with no financial or institutional stake, which we know they're not, secure a trial by jury in an open court, which they don't do, and then exercise original jurisdiction where the Constitution grants it, which they're not doing. So look at all these violations that are wrapped up. Okay, so these state tribunals, where the state is both party and judge, not courts of record, not proceeding according to the Constitution, the trust indentures that they willingly agree to be governed by. They're operating under states, the statutes, policy, and their administrative rule, but completely disregarding the common law that they're required to operate by. They're financially incentivized to convict you, and they're bypassing the trial by jury and by reclassifying a lot of these charges as civil infractions, right? Because they're just using you as death slaves. That's all they're doing. They're using this just to steal money from you, okay? So these are not courts of justice. They're just commercial enforcement mechanisms operating under the color of law, okay? They're operating in their private capacity, which means we can hold them to that, okay? But we got to use the provisions that are given to us. So here's a real good way for really to see it, okay? So when the state drags you into one of their legislative or administrative tribunals under the guise of a judicial court of record, it's like taking a big pile of shit, okay? And you're going to put it in a box, and we're going to wrap it up all nice pretty with some paper and put some bows on it. All right, we're going to make it look all pretty, okay? And then they're going to give it to you, and you're going to be all excited and happy thinking you're getting a present, right? And then you're going to open it, and surprise, it's a big pile of shit. Okay, that's what these courts are, because they're not real courts, and that's exactly what's going on. People are walking in here thinking these are courts, and they're not. They're just piles of shit. So it's not justice; it's just legal theater. That's if you really pay attention to what they're doing, they're all just they're just playing. It's the same plays over and over and over because it's all scripted. They're just doing these things to give you the illusion that these things they're lawful when they're not. So another one of the clauses out of the Constitution, right, that they're bound by, that we have to destroy what they're doing, is the Republican guarantee, which is Article 4, Section 4, which reads, "The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. The republic requires separation of powers, due process of law, trial by jury, and independent courts of record." They're violating all of those. So when the state's writing the law, enforcing the law, prosecutes the law, judges the law, and they profit from the outcome, the whole Republican form of government, the structure has collapsed. Okay, then this is just administrative tyranny used to use you as a debt slave. This is not a republic in how they're supposed to be operating. So a couple examples is, on a traffic stop, the cop, the state employee, he's stopping you. They're demanding license, insurance, right, all this stuff under threat of duress, because obviously we all know what happens when you try to assert your rights and how they're trained to do. Okay, then no injured party exists. And then the citation reads, the state or the city versus you, right? They're the same thing. The prosecutor works for the state, the judge is paid by the state, and the fines are collected by the same state. So let's ask yourself, how can there be a fair hearing when every actor is on the same payroll and the state profits either way? There can't, right? Huge conflict of interest. So here's another example. You get a city code violation. You say tall grass or no permit, operating without a license. The city writes the code. The city officer cites you, the city prosecutor files a case, the city judge hears it, and then the city keeps the money. That's not trial. That's a contractual penalty loop disguised as a judicial proceeding to steal your money and use you as a debt slave. But this is why we have the Bill of Rights. This is why this was implemented, right? Because they are a safeguard. They're not conveniences. They are literally safeguards designed to stop the state from doing this. But we got to understand them and comprehend them, or we can't assert them. Okay, so when they're doing this, it's a First Amendment violation for many different reasons. But for instance, when the courts they're violating this when they ignore your filings, or they're punishing you for making jurisdictional challenges. You have a Fourth Amendment violation when they're stopping and seizing you without any individualized suspicion of a crime, and right, they're using this to become tools of revenue, not justice. Okay. You also have a Fifth Amendment violation because you cannot be forced to confess, incriminate yourself, participate in your own prosecution, because being compelled to hand over a license, insurance, or registration, and then being prosecuted using that evidence is a due process defect, especially when the state is the one that is both party and judge. So we also have a Sixth Amendment violation because we see these are administrative hearings. We're not able to confront our accuser, right? There's supposed to be an affidavit with an injured party. The state's not that, right? The state's supposed to be protecting our rights. But we see what's really going on. It's also violating the Seventh Amendment because they're just relabeling a lot of these fines as civil so that they can try and tell you we don't have to give you juries when they have to. Under our Seventh Amendment, we're guaranteed that. So so at the end of the day, when the state, let's wrap it up here, so that when the state's your accuser, the prosecutor, judge, and beneficiary, that you're not in a lawful forum, they're violating the Constitution, and they're violating several different rights in the provisions that they're sworn by. So Article 3, Section 2 literally destroys their jurisdiction. That's just one of the many ways that it destroys their jurisdiction. The Guarantee Clause, Article 4, Section 4, exposes their fraud, and our rights are the firewall. So and once you see this, you really can unsee it. So, and I hope people really start to catch on to these things, and I can really start elaborating more in different videos, but I just want to kind of get this out there and get the seed planted. But now you see it, now you know, so let's share it, let's start asserting these things, start preserving the record, because we're only going to get justice when we start really exposing this tyranny and using the tools that our founders gave us to hold our public servants accountable.